algorithm feeds me this content all day. And one of the things I thought was interesting, and I think it was one of the big marketing influencers was talking about how podcasting is going to be the new blogging, which I personally, I agree. I've said it before. I think podcasting is incredibly powerful for a lot of reasons. So I think podcasting is something that people should be doing, especially if you're in a space. I mean, it really doesn't matter what space you're in. I mean, ideally, if you were in a knowledge field, like if you were a lawyer or if you were, an accountant, if you had one of those things where you could grow where your brand is really going to become your network and your network is going to become your prospects, that makes sense. But even if you are, a plumber or in the service world, if you're a gym owner, it's still a great way to get a lot of high value content very quickly and very affordably. But the other thing that I was watching one of the videos I got fed, besides the one that talked about podcast being the new blog, I got fed a video by Gary Vee, and he was talking about how the cell phone is the new TV. And I think he made a really good point. His point was basically you could look at companies that were just crushing it in the 30s and 40s. I'm not sure when the television was invented, but they were killing it on radio. They were using radio because that's what everybody listened to. That there was no TV yet, right? And then TV came along, and there were those people that just stuck with radio. They didn't want to get into TV. They wanted to stay with radio because it always worked before, and they ended up losing to the people that got into TV. And now the new thing, I mean, it's not even new, but in the big picture, it's still new. It doesn't feel new, but honestly, any like social media, it's still a very small percentage of people that are contributing to the content creation, even though it doesn't feel that way. A lot of people aren't doing it. And I've had a conversation with my friends where I look at, and I'll use TikTok as an example, but you could say Instagram Reels, a short form video, pick your format, right? A lot of people, when TikTok came on and they really transformed everything a couple years ago with their algorithm and it being more interest-based and all that stuff. But I didn't look at TikTok, and I still don't look at TikTok or these other formats as competition in the social media landscape as much as I look at them as competition for Netflix and for, whatever's left of cable TV, streaming TV. And I say this because my wife and I will sit down to watch a show on whatever. And unless it's a show that we're like really, really into, 9 times out of 10, we'll end up on our phones scrolling through stuff versus watching what's on the TV. And I saw this video that I thought was absolutely hilarious, because this actually speaks to it. I know I'm not the only one. That feels this way, right? So I think this is like the new normal. We'll see listen to what this girl says.
It doesn't feel good to admit this, but I legitimately don't have the attention span anymore for TV or movies. Like, I'll put something on and I think I'm going to enjoy it, and then the next thing I know, I'm not enjoying it because I'm just looking at my phone. And sometimes I delay putting the TV on. I'm like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to commit.
She's not ready yet because she doesn't have the attention span for TV. So again, when you're planning your strategy for 2024, the most important thing that you can do is get yourself lined up with where people are. You want to go where people are going to be. And right now, everybody is on their phones, right? And it's been that way for a few years. And there is truth in the fact that people that watch long form content are more valuable than people that watch short form content. And what that means is if you've got somebody who is popular on TikTok and they've got 1 million followers on TikTok, they are going to get more, you would get more benefit from having, I don't know what the exact number is, but you would get more benefit from having 200,000 followers on YouTube if you're making 5, 10, 15, 30-minute videos, if that makes sense. So there's definitely room for both. And I think that if you've got the ability and you've got the time, I think the smart play, and again, podcasting falls into this because especially now YouTube is getting into podcasting. YouTube is, they've got a podcast tab on every channel now. So if you have a podcast, it's almost like having its own playlist, but it's set up as a podcast. YouTube is actually really pushing podcasts right now, video podcasts. So this is a great time to do that because again, it's almost like, so if I take this podcast and chop it up, the short form stuff is like highlights, and hopefully if people like what I'm saying or whatever, then eventually they would go check out the long form stuff where they're listening to either the actual full podcast or watching the full length video on YouTube. And those people they're building a relationship with you. You're building a relationship with them. So even if you're sitting there saying, I had one of my first couple episodes that I put out, I had like 40 people watch the episode. And that's like nothing, right? From any content creator, they'd be like, that's nothing. But to me, if you told me, hey, Ryan, I'm going to let you go into a room full of 40 strangers and they're going to sit and listen to you talk, that's pretty damn impressive, right? So you kind of need to flip the script on its head a little bit and be like, yeah, I don't have 1 million followers. I don't have 100,000. I don't have 1,000 followers yet. But anybody that's listening to you is better than nobody listening to you. So you've got to get started with that stuff. And the phone is the TV. That's where people's attention is. So if you can find a way to activate short form video and long form video together, I think that's a hell of a good strategy for 2024 and beyond.